My name is John Gutzler, and I've been at this firm since 1982, 40 years. Came from Texas A&M with a master's degree and wanted to work for O'Neill because of his philosophy. So I've been here ever since, very happy.
And my name is Adam Reed. I've been with the firm since 2010, and I've been a partner here for the past 5 years, almost 6 years now. And I've worked with John through most of it and learned a lot of O'Neill and Powell Carson through John.
I guess it's fair to say that we've never given up on the history of the firm and the lessons taught by O'Neill Ford. And that's fundamental to the way that we practice architecture. It's about respect and materials and craft and details. And not that other people don't do that, but it's been instrumental in the way I've practiced architecture, and we're still practicing architecture. So when we do a rebrand, we didn't want to forget the legacy. We wanted to build on it, but make it a little bit fresher.
We engaged kind of a core group in the office and then a consultant to help us with the rebrand. And it was a good time because we had been at our old office at St. Paul Square for almost 40 years. We don't move very often. And when we looked at a physical need to kind of be closer to the places we work, like downtown, a rebrand in terms of our digital presence, our physical presence, and then really kind of the Ford Powell Carson taking on a more abstracted FPC and even the glyph for how we use it was something we thought would maybe still pay homage to the past, but also kind of, like John said, freshen it up a little bit and stay competitive, because we have a lot more people practicing in San Antonio, and we want to make sure that people don't look at us only for the past. So on the logo design itself, it was probably the one element that we said would be the most recognizable and vastly shared through different media. And so when we were talking about what we needed to kind of incorporate in the design of the new logo, it was that we have a very delicate serif font that we use. It's not a stocked font, but it's actually one that we had graphic designers help us create. And we feel like it's still very classic and has some very nice, balance and form and everything else. It looks great in gray, it looks great in black, it looks in all the grays we use. It looks really good. But it still paid kind of tribute to like the details of, what a letter can be and how you would mix them together. So our colors that we use, we've got about 6 colors that we'll use in print and digital media, and they're all pulling from elements of design that we look at as regional. So we pulled kind of some clay tones, earth tones, greens, things that kind of harken back to O'Neill's favorite use of colors, but also West Texas projects and things we've done. So our palette is much more kind of here, we feel like, and not so trendy and on brand with things that we made in 5 years saying, I wish we didn't do that. So
this has been a real challenge. I think it's an iconic building. It's a strong presence on Broadway, and as Broadway gets developed, it becomes even stronger to represent the history. It was an opportunity for us to use our renovation, preservation legacy to take a building and kind of turn it into a modern office building. So respecting the past, building on the future, doing something that is really bold but simple and regional on the inside, and on the outside respecting the character that was crafted in the early 20s and 30s.
The building's always been something you drive by it and you kind of have been shocked with how empty it's been for so long, at least growing up in San Antonio. So I think it was 2017 or 18 when Gray Street Partners approached us saying they have a property they purchased on Broadway. Would we be interested in taking a tour of it? We really at the time weren't thinking about for our office. When we got in, and actually in this space alone, we saw 9-foot dropped coffered ceilings and all of this ornate, not even ornate, but just all this history was covered up since 1993. As laydown space, we saw potential in it, and we kind of talked internally about moving our office. So it was a great situation where John and I were able to work on not just the design of our office, but also a project that meant so much, like you said, to Broadway. So it was kind of a nice intersection of work we do with the place that we needed.
Part of the idea that we do with historic buildings is reinvest in them. So this shows, as an example, to anybody that wants to come here, what you can do with an old building, how you can use it. So adaptive reuse. It's a perfect opportunity for a building that, like Adam said, was abandoned for over 10 years to take it and turn it around. So
when the building was first discussed going back to be under construction, we had people who actually worked here up until 1992, 1993 when it closed, reaching out to us about, when they worked here for the paper. So in 1929, William Randolph Hearst purchased the light, which had been in operation since the late 1800s, and set up a physical presence right here at the corner of Broadway and McCullough, which is catty corner to their biggest competitor for the past 30 years before that, which was the Express News. So William Randolph Hearst cleared out, which was a lot of the old Irish Flats area. Some of those homes are still around today, and built the light building. And it was meant to kind of feel like it belonged in San Antonio by facade really alone. Everything inside was clay tile and CMU and very industrial, except for this space. And so yeah, it was slowly grown into and expanded as the presses and the technology got larger and the demand for papers got larger. And it basically was their headquarters for the largest paper up until the 1980s, when the Express News eclipsed the Light as being the single voice in San Antonio. And then they eventually tried to sell. Nobody, I think, would buy the Light. And so it basically closed in 1993, and Hearst purchased the Express News and has operated it since.
We took the opportunity to remove some slabs in the floors, take down mezzanines that were built over the years. This space actually had a mechanical unit hanging from above it, and like Adam said, a lay-in coffered metal ceiling that was low, covered up the Alamo shape on the entry door. It was a prime opportunity to kind of take something and turn it around. And so that's what was intriguing to me. The building was originally built with a lot of character. There was I call them the celosia windows, the little stained glass windows that are at the top for natural ventilation. There was an opportunity to bring light all the way across the building.
Another thing that was appealing about us moving over here and getting to renovate this space was that the location. Really, if it was a Broadway address, we were kind of interested in being in the middle of it. Our old office was at Sunset Station for 40 years, and we were downtown, but divorced from downtown because of the highway, and just so we can walk to literally most of 80% of our projects within 10 minutes of here. We're excited to be part of the Broadway expansion, and a lot of our projects, by virtue of us being around for as long as we have, working on some wonderful parts of Texas history, they're challenges, and being able to come into a building that had beautiful elements covered up, we kind of like that. And so it was a challenge that was also rewarding because we get to see it every day. So.
We were always fractured in our other offices. We weren't all together in one space. We wanted to unify the staff so that everybody felt like they were working with everybody else and not fractured the way that it was over at St. Paul Square. So that was a major driving force. But looking at the building, we also looked at ways to bring in natural light to the break room areas, to the conference rooms, take advantage of the big windows. We've got major windows along the north wall, along McCullough. That's all north light. So it's wonderful lighting for the studio space. We've got strong south light. We've got a dynamic reception area that opens up as you progress through the building. And it's just been a delight to kind of play those games with simple materials and finishes that still reflect the regionalism in some of the things that O'Neill had established, the heinous clay tile, the craft of wood, some simple warm elements that take a cold space and kind of play it up. The other thing this building has are the columns have a flared capital and a spread capital on top of that because it was industrial loading. And we decided to make that a feature. So in the big studio space, it becomes almost a hippo-style hall with these major columns running through it. And we even took the opportunity, which most clients will never let us do, of putting columns in the middle of hallways so that they do become a feature. And it's
you
kind
walk
of
around and engage
them. You engage it. And then the final comment on the columns and some other things is we left some of the history still there. So rather than patching them and making them perfect, we left them imperfect. So there's some history and some texture in some of these things. So you'll see a perfectly round column with carved away plaster that shows over the ages how it was used and changed. So
the space that we're in as architects and designers needs to be a showroom for us. And so having the open studio was one major, need for us, but also being able to take a client through from when they get greeted at the front desk to a conference space like we're in now, and having a curated, procession for them to come in. We've acquired so many, and we have so many wonderful artifacts here in the office, whether they be O'Neill Ford's, sketches and books and history, to the Isaac Maxwell fixtures, the Lynn Ford wood carvings, and it's stuff that probably 60 years ago people didn't think wow, those will be on display one day. They're just in homes and buildings. But when you walk a client through now and you can touch and feel, this is the Maxwell room because we've got Maxwell artifacts and we've got the Lynn Ford room. I mean, when you got things like that you can put out the mood fixtures throughout, we can showcase them in a way. So when we talked about the space as being a showroom, you can see evidence behind it as really being something. Another interesting thing about the building from an urban standpoint was the building had always been closed up to downtown facing south. So when we first came out here with the developer, the parking lot between us and downtown had a giant 4-story infill plaster wall with metal studs, and that was just a result of the building never growing. Them just basically saying we're never expanding, and it was closed up. And when we first kind of started sketching and talking about tenability in the space for the second, third, and fourth floors, we said let's take that out, get a partial demo permit, take it out, and put up a 3-story glass curtain wall. So when you go up onto those upper floors, you've got really commanding close views of downtown that you don't really get in this area. So it made it a desirable urban space that otherwise was just punched windows along McCullough and Broadway. So that was probably the biggest external, other than painting the building. That was the largest bold move we made on this thing, was actually a glass wall facing downtown.
Well, a lot of this furniture, like in this room, we had for 60 years. So thanks to former employees and careful, taking care of these things, we were able to reuse a lot of the classic furniture. And we always thought that classic furniture helps set off the architectural spaces, unlike other furniture that's flashy or faddish or whatever. So if you've got a classic Verno chair, it belongs in a museum, it belongs in an architect's office, simple leather, simple materials, but nice scale. So a lot of the furniture was existing, and we chose how to reuse that. But then we complemented it with new furniture, and the new furniture is a lot of the Knoll and Herman Miller, and we did some custom workstations you'll see in the studio space. But again, we repeated the same materials. So rather than try to do different things in every space, we tried to use the same common materials and scale elements in a lot of the spaces. So there's continuity. So, whether it's furniture or whether it's the reuse of Dehanus brick that pops up as a color accent throughout the space, or whether it's the black brick that we used on the outside that we brought inside, or the white columns. So some of those simple materials. And then the furniture itself, special in some places and kind of understated in a lot of others. So there's some big white layout tables. There's a big white table in the break room with some black chairs. I mean, we're not trying to be flashy with it. We're just trying to show the human scale.
The other thing too is just the palette in general. When we were walking around during design, there's a beautiful tile band that John kind of mentioned outside that you can kind of see evidence of, and it's got an orange, a green, a charcoal gray, and it's just this beautiful little pattern. And so if you look around the office, it's oranges and greens and charcoal gray, the brick, the furniture, everything. So it's really, really understated, but works because it's so subtle of a cue, I think, yeah.
The idea was that the colors themselves, like we used in the studio spaces, a gray color on the ceiling so that we could hide the conduit and expose ductwork and stuff. But that gray actually has a hint of green in it. So when you bring green plants in, psychologically you see the two play against each other and make it kind of a compatible visual. And so the plants are real important along the north wall to break up the spaces, bring some greenery into it. It also hits on our sustainability mission within the office to be more responsive to the environment. And it's really taken off. I think people really like it. We planted some pothos plants, some vines in the 2-story conference rooms, and they're just really taken off. And it's just such a delight for me to come in and see the plants hanging and know that that's part of the space. So.
Yeah, I mean, the plants coming in was definitely, it makes the space feel more inviting, and I think it's also the result of us having a bunch of 20-year-old employees that just love. So we have fiddle leaf figs aplenty and all the things that you can get. But yeah, it really was about bringing in some of that natural elements, and really too, it's kind of interesting to see which ones thrive and not, because we know where they grow. But as also people come in and every morning they're taking care of their plants.
One of the things that we did was we wanted to keep the historic floor in this area, and the floor was a beautiful kind of a green concrete. We left it on the stair in the background, but we couldn't because it was so torn up and so patched and compromised over the years. So we ended up doing what we call a mission tile floor, which is a wonderful encaustic tile floor with a custom pattern, custom color. And we carried that throughout the space and then carried it up the stairwell wall as kind of a splash of an element. So it's kind of a craft element because they're handmade. These glass walls here are demountable walls made by a company called Dirt. And Dirt is one of the primo makers of demountable walls. This is their glass product, and it's beautifully detailed with the mullions in between. But to set this up, we had to create the steel frame around this room. You'll see a lot of that. So that's a custom steel frame that we developed so that we could get this cantilever corner to play up their beautiful glass corners that they make. And so we're not selling that product, but we love the craft of that product, and we welcome workplace resources and the Dirt people to come in and show it off. So it's a good example of what we've done on a lot of other projects where it's an off-the-shelf item, but it's applied in a craft fashion.
And we don't have any private offices in the suite, so it was important, and that's kind of been a little bit of our philosophy for a while now, that we want to have our leadership and staff all kind of mixed in and being collaborative as we are as a profession. But one thing that we did out in the main studio space was use the Dehanus clay tile walls that don't engage fully to the ceiling, so that you've got definition of space for the materials library, the business office, the marketing, print workshop area. And those areas are kind of defined, but you can hear conversation over the top and you can break away. So it was important for us not to have a bunch of, executive window spaces and let the light really flood in. So in the main studio space, we still work kind of the genesis of projects very much like over a table. Especially the two of us probably in the office more than a lot of others start with sketching, and we do a lot of kind of iterative trace paper. So the studio is set up around these big white layout tables as opposed to being set up around computer banks and things like that. So we work in kind of bands along the studio space where you have kind of principals on one side that work across the table from the staff on projects. So those layout spaces were critical, and architecturally they were kind of also probably the most impactful part under those big ring lights in the studio space. So it's just kind of all about really we work over those every day.
And they're designed with flat file drawers tucked in underneath them so that we can clean them off and store the stuff underneath it. So it's practical as well as very functional and encourages collaboration. So